The winter wind cut through Marcus Delaney's threadbare jacket like a blade made of ice. He pulled the collar higher around his weathered neck and shuffled his worn boots through the snow-covered sidewalk of Bridgeport's forgotten district. 3 years ago, he had been a decorated Marine sergeant with a Purple Heart and a chest full of medals. Now he was just another nameless face in the growing population of America's homeless veterans, a statistic that nobody wanted to discuss at dinner parties. His shopping cart rattled behind him, containing everything he owned in this world. A military sleeping bag that still smelled faintly of the deserts where he had fought. A few changes of clothes wrapped in plastic bags to protect them from the rain. A battered photograph of his late mother, and a military canteen that had been with him since basic training. The photograph was the only thing of value he still possessed, and he guarded it more carefully than most people guarded their inheritances. The streets were empty at this hour, just past midnight on a Thursday in January. Most sensible people were home, warm in their beds, dreaming of tomorrow's possibilities. Marcus had no home, no bed, and tomorrow held nothing but the same struggle for survival that had defined his existence since he had returned from Afghanistan with a limp in his left leg and ghosts in his head that no medication could silence. He was heading toward the shelter on 5th Street, the one that opened its doors at midnight for veterans only. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and the volunteers didn't ask questions. They didn't try to shake his hand or thank him for his service in that way that made him feel like a zoo animal on display. They just handed him a cot and a cup of coffee and let him be. That was when he heard it, the sound that would change everything. It was a whimper, soft and pitiful, coming from the alley between a boarded-up furniture store and what appeared to be an old hotel. Marcus stopped, his military-trained ears straining through the wind. The whimper came again, this time accompanied by a soft scratching sound. Against every instinct that told him to keep moving, to preserve what little warmth his body still retained, Marcus turned toward the alley. His leg protested the movement, the old wound from an IED blast flaring with familiar resentment, but he pushed through the pain. In the shadows between the buildings, barely visible in the pale glow of a dying streetlight, he found her. A dog, young and scruffy, with matted brown fur and eyes that held an intelligence that seemed almost human. She was tangled in a mesh of wire and rope, clearly abandoned by whoever had previously owned her. Her fur was filthy, her ribs visible through her skin. But when she looked up at Marcus, there was no fear in her eyes, only hope. "Hey there, girl," Marcus whispered, lowering himself to his knees with a grunt. His bad leg screamed in protest, but he ignored it. "How'd you get yourself into this mess?" The dog's tail wagged weakly, and she let out a small sound that might have been a greeting or might have been a plea for help. Marcus examined the tangle, his experienced hands working the wire free with patience born of years of disarming explosives. The whole time, the dog watched him with those strange, knowing eyes. It took him 20 minutes to free her, but when he finally lifted her from the debris, she pressed her small body against his chest and began to lick his chin. The warmth of her was like a small miracle, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years stir within his chest. All right," he said, setting her down gently. "You're free now. Go on, find yourself a better spot." But the dog didn't run. She sat at his feet and looked up at him with an expression that seemed almost pleading. When Marcus took a step toward the shelter, she followed. When he stopped, she stopped. When he turned to shoo her away, she simply wagged her tail and tilted her head. "I can't take care of myself," Marcus said softly, the words bitter in his mouth. "What makes you think I can take care of you?" The dog whined softly and pressed her nose against his frozen hand. Marcus looked down at her, at the creature that had chosen him out of all the people who had passed by that alley that night. He thought about the emptiness of his days, the way time stretched out before him like an endless gray road with no destination. "You'd be better off with someone else," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew he was going to keep her.
He named her Scout because she had found him when he had been searching for nothing, and because he had always believed that scouts went ahead to find the way forward. In the months that followed, Scout would prove this name more appropriate than Marcus could ever have imagined. The Blackwood Hotel had been closed for 15 years, and Bridgeport had done its best to forget it existed. Once a magnificent Gilded Age palace that had hosted presidents and millionaires, it had fallen into decrepitude after a series of tragedies had driven away both guests and investors. The city had tried to demolish it twice, but each time mysterious circumstances had halted the demolition orders. Some said it was the cost, others whispered darker explanations. The building sat at the corner of Blackwood Avenue and 5th Street, directly in Marcus's path to the Veterans Shelter. Every day he passed its wrought-iron gates. Every day he marveled at its once grand architecture, now crumbling beneath decades of neglect. The stone facade was still beautiful in its decay, gargoyles watching over a courtyard where weeds grew tall between the cracks in the marble. Scout, who had grown strong and healthy in the months since Marcus had found her, had an obsession with the hotel. Every time they passed it, she would stop and stare at the building with an intensity that made the fur along her spine stand on end. She would whine softly, then look back at Marcus as if trying to tell him something important. "What's got you so interested in that old place?" Marcus asked her one evening as they made their evening rounds. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street, and the hotel looked even more forbidding than usual. Scout sat down at the gate and began to howl, a long, mournful sound that seemed to echo off the walls of the surrounding buildings. Marcus tried to pull her away, but she resisted, her eyes fixed on the hotel's upper windows. That was when Marcus noticed the light. It was faint, barely visible in the gathering dusk, but it was there, a flickering orange glow in a 4th-floor window. Marcus blinked, sure he was seeing things. The hotel had been abandoned for 15 years. There was no power, no water, no reason for anyone to be inside. But the light flickered again, and this time Marcus was certain someone was in the Blackwood Hotel. He should have walked away. Now would have been the smart thing to do, the safe thing. Marcus had learned long ago that some doors were better left unopened, some mysteries better left unsolved. But Scout was still howling, and the light in the window had shifted to a pale blue, and something was pulling Marcus toward those gates with a force he couldn't explain. "All right, girl," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Let's see what's going on." The gate was locked, but the lock was rusted through, and with a few strong pulls, Marcus was able to swing it open. Scout bounded through ahead of him, her nails clicking on the cobblestones of the courtyard. Marcus followed, his heart pounding in his chest with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The courtyard was overgrown with vegetation that shouldn't have been able to survive in so little sunlight. Roses grew in wild profusion, their petals black as midnight despite the absence of light. Marcus didn't recognize the variety, and the more he looked at them, the more unsettled he became. They seemed almost artificial, too perfect, too dark. Scout was waiting for him at the hotel's main entrance. The doors were boarded over, but someone had removed the boards from a side entrance, leaving a dark gap in the wooden facade. Marcus could feel cold air blowing from within, carrying with it the smell of dust and decay and something else, something metallic that reminded him of blood. "This is a bad idea," Marcus said to Scout. "A very bad idea." Scout wagged her tail and disappeared through the opening. Cursing under his breath, Marcus followed. The interior of the Blackwood Hotel was a cathedral of decay. Marble floors, once gleaming, were cracked and stained. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, their light long since extinguished. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper that depicted scenes of pastoral beauty, a stark contrast to the ruins surrounding them. Scout led Marcus through the lobby, past a reception desk where an ancient clerk's bell sat gathering dust, toward a grand staircase that spiraled upward into darkness. The dog moved with purpose, her nose to the ground, following a scent trail that only she could perceive.
"Scout," Marcus called softly. "Wait."
But Scout didn't wait. She bounded up the stairs, her nails clicking on the marble, and Marcus had no choice but to follow. His bad leg burned with each step, but he pushed through the pain. He had endured worse in Afghanistan. He could endure this. On the second floor, the hotel's original beauty became even more apparent despite the decay. Doors lined a long hallway, each one slightly ajar, revealing rooms that had been frozen in time. Beds with rotting mattresses, wardrobes full of moth-eaten clothes, mirrors that reflected Marcus's passage with a delay that made him look over his shoulder twice to be sure he was alone.
"Hello?" Marcus called out, his voice echoing down the empty corridor. "Is anyone here?"
The only answer was the creaking of the old building and a distant sound that might have been laughter or might have been weeping. Marcus quickened his pace, following Scout's scent until he found her waiting outside a door at the end of the hallway. The door was different from the others. Where the other doors were simple wooden panels, this one was reinforced with iron bands and covered in symbols that Marcus didn't recognize. They looked almost like writing, but not in any alphabet he had ever seen. They seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, pulsing with a rhythm that matched Marcus's heartbeat. "Good girl," Marcus said, kneeling down to pet Scout. "You found something." Scout whined and pressed against the door. Marcus tried the handle, but it was locked. He was about to turn away to find another way in when he noticed the keyhole. It was shaped like a dog bone. "Well, that's specific," Marcus muttered. He searched the hallway, checking behind the decorative statues that lined the walls, until he found what he was looking for. A brass key hidden in the mouth of a stone lion. It fit the lock perfectly, turning with a soft click that seemed to resonate through the entire building. The door swung open, revealing a room that was nothing like the others. This room was clean, immaculate, in fact. The floor was polished hardwood, the walls were covered in silk wallpaper of deep burgundy, and furniture was arranged with an attention to detail that spoke of obsessive care. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, covered in velvet curtains that were tied back with golden cords. A writing desk sat by the window, and on it sat an inkwell and a fountain pen, both looking as though they had been used yesterday. But it was the walls that captured Marcus's attention. They were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, arranged in no apparent pattern, showing people from different eras and different states of distress. Some showed the subjects screaming. Others showed them fleeing from something just outside the frame. A few showed them lying still, their eyes wide and empty, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. And in the center of the wall, larger than all the others, was a single photograph of Marcus himself. He stepped back, his heart lurching into his throat. The photograph showed him sitting on a park bench, Scout sleeping at his feet, the Blackwood Hotel visible in the distance. The image was dated just 3 days ago. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded of the empty room. "What do you want?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Marcus could see his breath fogging in the air. Scout began to growl, her hackles rising, her eyes fixed on the corner of the room where the shadows seemed darker than they should have been. "I am not your enemy, Sergeant Delaney." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was deep and ancient, carrying the weight of centuries. Marcus spun around, searching for the source, but the room appeared to be empty. "Show yourself," Marcus commanded, falling back on his military training. "Show yourself, or I will assume hostile intent." The shadows in the corner coalesced, taking shape until they formed the figure of a man. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a black suit that had been fashionable a century ago. His face was pale and angular, his eyes black pits that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When he smiled, Marcus saw that his teeth were filed to points. "My name is Cornelius Blackwood," the figure said, and his voice was the creak of old floorboards and the moan of wind through empty rooms. "I built this hotel in 1889, and I have been its guardian ever since."
"You're dead," Marcus said flatly.
"I am transformed," Cornelius replied. "But death is merely a change of state, Sergeant. You, of all people, should understand that." Marcus did understand. He understood it better than he wanted to. The ghosts of Afghanistan had never really left him. They just wore different faces now.
"What do you want from me?"
"I want you to save my hotel," Cornelius said, and there was something almost pleading in his ancient voice. "I want you to break the curse that has bound me here for so long." "Curses aren't real," Marcus said, but even as the words left his mouth, he didn't believe them. Not in this room, not with this creature standing before him. "Curses are very real, Sergeant, and this one has trapped me here for 132 years. I cannot leave. I cannot rest. I can only watch as my life's work crumbles around me." Scout's growl deepened, and she took a step toward Cornelius. The ghost recoiled from her, his shadowy form flickering. "The dog!" Cornelius whispered, and there was fear in his voice. "How did you come by the dog?" "She found me," Marcus said, "in an alley, tangled in some wire. I freed her, and she stayed." Cornelius stared at Scout with an expression that mixed hope and terror. "Do you know what she is, Sergeant? Do you know what she represents?" Marcus shook his head. "She is a phylax," Cornelius said, "a guardian spirit in animal form. They are rare, exceedingly rare. They appear only when there is a great injustice to be corrected, a great wrong to be made right. Your dog did not find you by accident, Sergeant. She was sent to find you." Marcus looked down at Scout, who was staring up at him with those intelligent eyes. He had always known she was special, but he had never imagined anything like this. "What injustice?" Marcus asked. "What wrong?" Cornelius's form flickered, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with centuries of sorrow. "I did something terrible, Sergeant. In the basement of this hotel there is a vault. In that vault I hid something that did not belong to me, something that I stole from people who trusted me. The curse is not a punishment for what I did to them. It is a punishment for what I did to myself, for becoming the kind of man who could do such things." "What did you steal?" "Gold," Cornelius said. "Pure gold, minted before the Civil War. A fortune in Confederate gold, hidden away by Southern generals who wanted to fund a second rise of the Confederacy. They entrusted it to me, their trusted Northern banker, because I convinced them, I shared their sympathies. But when the war was lost and they came to retrieve their treasure, I betrayed them. I took the gold for myself, and I killed everyone who knew where it was hidden." Marcus felt sick. "You murdered them?" "I did," Cornelius confirmed. "I poisoned them at a dinner party, right in this very room. I watched them die, one by one, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. The gold was mine. The hotel was mine. Everything was exactly as I wanted it." "And then the curse found you." "And then the curse found me," Cornelius agreed. "The moment I tried to access the gold, to move it from its hiding place, something ancient woke up. It did not matter that the men I killed were evil men, that their gold was stolen from the labor of slaves. What mattered was that I had taken a life. Not just one life, but many. The curse did not care about justice. It cared only about balance.
So you're trapped here, guarding a fortune you can never spend.
Yes, and the curse grows stronger every year. Soon it will spread beyond these walls. The people who pass by on the street, the ones who feel a chill when they walk past, they're already being affected. In another decade, the curse will consume this entire block, and in another century, it will consume this entire city.
"Why are you telling me this?" Marcus demanded. "What do you want me to do about it?"
Cornelius looked at him with those bottomless black eyes, and for a moment, Marcus saw something that might have been genuine humanity in that ancient, terrible face. "I want you to break the curse, Sergeant. I want you to find the gold and release it back into the world. Use it to help others, as it should have been used decades ago. Let the spirits of those I killed finally rest, and let me finally rest as well."
And if I refuse?
Cornelius's form flickered, and the temperature in the room dropped even further. "Then the curse will continue, and you will watch as everyone and everything you care about is consumed by it, including the dog." Scout barked, a sharp, angry sound that made Cornelius flinch. "I didn't mean," Cornelius began, but Marcus cut him off. "I'll do it," Marcus said. "I'll break the curse, but on one condition. When this is over, you tell me everything. Not just the story you've already told me, but all of it. Every detail, every name, every crime." Cornelius was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, his form rippling like water disturbed by a stone. "Agreed, but I must warn you, Sergeant. The vault is protected by more than just my curse. There are other guardians down there, things I summoned to protect my treasure, things I no longer control. You will need more than courage to face them." Marcus looked down at Scout, who was staring at Cornelius with an intensity that made even the ancient ghost take a step back. "I have everything I need," Marcus said. "Lead the way." The stairs to the basement were hidden behind a bookshelf in the hotel's library. Cornelius pressed a hidden mechanism, and the shelves swung outward with a grinding of ancient gears, revealing a spiral staircase that descended into darkness, so complete it seemed almost solid. "The vault is 200 feet below ground," Cornelius said. "I had it excavated when the hotel was built, a secret place where I could keep my acquisitions." "You had secret passages and underground vaults built into a hotel?" Marcus asked. "Weren't people suspicious?" "I was a wealthy man in an era when wealthy men were not questioned," Cornelius replied. "I could have built a castle in the middle of New York City, and no one would have asked me why. That is the true power of money, Sergeant. Not what it can buy, but what it allows you to hide." Scout started down the stairs without hesitation, her nails clicking on the stone steps. Marcus followed, one hand on the wall for balance, his bad leg protesting the steep descent. Cornelius's ghostly form floated beside them, casting an eerie blue light that illuminated their path. The deeper they went, the more the air changed. It became heavier, thick with the scent of earth and decay and something else, something that made Marcus's stomach clench. He had smelled this before, in Afghanistan, in the aftermath of battles. It was the smell of death. "How many people did you kill?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. "In the beginning, only those who threatened me. Business rivals, journalists who asked too many questions, employees who saw too much." "And later?" Cornelius was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Later, I killed for the pleasure of it. There was a period, Maybe 10 years when I could not stop. I would invite guests to the hotel for exclusive parties, and I would watch them die, one by one, in increasingly elaborate ways. I became an artist of death, Sergeant, a sculptor of corpses.
Marcus stopped, his hand gripping the wall so tightly he could feel the stone grinding against his palm. Why?
Because I could, Cornelius said simply. Because I had the power to end lives and the money to escape consequences. And because somewhere along the way, I forgot that the people I killed were people at all. They became objects, puzzles to be solved, systems to be optimized.
That's not an answer.
No, Cornelius agreed, it isn't, but it is the truth. They continued in silence. The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling down through layers of rock that should not have existed beneath the city. Marcus lost track of time. His leg had gone numb hours ago, or maybe it was minutes. It was impossible to tell in this timeless darkness.
Finally, they reached the bottom.
The vault door was enormous, made of iron that had somehow resisted rust for over a century. Symbols were carved into its surface, the same ones Marcus had seen on the door upstairs, and they glowed with a faint red light that pulsed like a heartbeat.
"The guardians are behind this door," Cornelius said. "I summoned them long ago, creatures of shadow and hunger, to protect my treasure. But as my curse grew stronger, I lost control of them. They no longer obey me. They only obey the hunger."
What kind of creatures?
"The kind that feed on fear," Cornelius replied. "They will try to terrify you first. They will show you your worst nightmares, your deepest shame. If you resist, they will try to consume you body and soul. But there is a way to bind them."
Let me guess. Scout is part of the solution.
Cornelius nodded. "Phylaxes are natural guardians against creatures of shadow. Your dog can see through their illusions and resist their hunger, but she cannot face them alone. You must help her."
How?
"You must face your own fears, Sergeant. The creatures will try to use your memories against you. Your time in Afghanistan, the people you couldn't save, the friends you watched die. You must acknowledge these things, accept them, and move forward. Only then can your dog lead you through."
Marcus closed his eyes. He had spent 3 years running from these memories, burying them beneath layers of numbness and denial. Now he was being asked to face them head on.
He thought of Corporal James Williams, who had died saving Marcus's life by throwing himself onto a grenade. He thought of the village women and children who had been caught in crossfire that neither side would take responsibility for. He thought of the night terrors that still woke him screaming, the way his hands shook when he heard loud noises, the way he couldn't stand being in crowds anymore. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't go back there." Scout pressed against his leg, her warmth seeping through his worn jeans. Marcus looked down at her, at the creature who had chosen him, who had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. "She didn't find me by accident," Marcus said slowly. "You said she was sent to find me. Why? Why me?" "Because you have the strength to do what needs to be done," Cornelius replied. "Because you have already faced the darkness and survived. Because you are one of the few people who understand that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it." Marcus took a deep breath, then another. He thought of all the things he had survived, all the ways he had been broken and had put himself back together again. "All right," he said finally. "Open the door." Cornelius raised a ghostly hand, and the vault door swung open with a groan of ancient metal. Beyond was darkness so complete it seemed almost tangible, and from that darkness something began to emerge. The creatures that emerged from the darkness were like nothing Marcus had ever seen, and in Afghanistan he had seen things that had driven men mad. These were shapes made of pure shadow, constantly shifting and reforming, never settling into any recognizable form. They had eyes, dozens of them, scattered across their amorphous bodies like stars in a night sky. And they had mouths, too, full of teeth that seemed to go on forever. "Stay behind me," Marcus said to Scout, but the dog had already positioned herself between him and the creatures. Her fur was standing on end, and she was growling a deep, continuous sound that seemed to make the very air vibrate. The creatures paused at the threshold, their many eyes fixing on Marcus and Scout. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the shadows began to speak.
"Sergeant Marcus Delaney," they whispered, and their voices were the sound of wind through dead trees, of water dripping in empty caves. "We know you. We know your shame."
The darkness shifted, and suddenly Marcus was no longer in the vault. He was back in Afghanistan, back in the dusty village where everything had gone wrong. He could smell the dust and the cordite. He could hear the shouts in a language he barely understood. He could see Williams falling, the grenade rolling toward him, the look of surprise on his friend's face as the world exploded into white light. "You couldn't save him," the shadows whispered. "You couldn't save any of them. You crawled away while they died. You lived when you should have died." The vision shifted, and now Marcus was watching himself from above. He was younger, thinner, his face not yet weathered by years of struggle. He was running through a burning building, trying to reach a family trapped in the basement. He could hear the children's screams, see the flames closing in around him. He was so close, and then the ceiling came down and he was thrown backward, and when he woke up in the hospital 3 days later, they told him the family hadn't made it. "3 children," the shadows groaned. "Anna, Miguel, and little Sophia. They called out your name as they burned. Did you know that? They called for the American soldier who had promised to save them." Marcus fell to his knees, the weight of memories crushing him. He could hear the children's screams, feel the heat of the flames, smell the acrid smoke that had filled his lungs. "You failed them," the shadows said. "You failed everyone, and you will fail again. You will always fail." Scout barked, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the darkness like a blade of light. The vision shattered, and Marcus was back in the vault, the creatures looming over him. "No," Scout seemed to say with that bark. "Not yet. Not this time." Marcus blinked, tears streaming down his face. He looked at Scout, at the creature who had chosen him, who had believed in him. He thought about everything Cornelius had told him, about the man he had been, the crimes he had committed, the curse that had trapped him for over a century. Cornelius had faced his darkness. That was what had made him into a monster. But Marcus didn't have to become that. He didn't have to let the shadows define him. "I failed them," Marcus said, his voice raw. "I failed Williams. I failed the family in the village. I've failed a lot of people." The creatures paused, their many eyes blinking in confusion. "I failed them," Marcus continued. "But I survived. And survival isn't the same as victory, but it's not the same as defeat either. It just is. I did the best I could with what I had, and sometimes that wasn't enough. But I kept going. I didn't let the failure consume me." He stood up, his legs shaky but solid. He put his hand on Scout's head, feeling the warmth of her, the reality of her. "Yes, I watched people die. Yes, I couldn't save everyone. That's war. That's life. It doesn't mean I'm worthless. It doesn't mean I should have died instead of them.
It means I'm still here, and I have to make that count for something."
The creatures hissed, their forms writhing in what seemed like anger.
"You cannot defeat us," they whispered. "We are eternal. We are hunger. We are the darkness between the stars."
"Maybe," Marcus said, "but I'm not fighting you alone."
Scout stepped forward, and as she did, her form began to change. Her body grew, her fur shifting from brown to a brilliant gold that seemed to glow with inner light. Her eyes, which had always seemed almost human, became something more. She was no longer a dog. She was a guardian, a phylax, a being of ancient power.
She barked again, and this time the sound was like thunder, like the crack of creation itself. The creatures screamed, their forms beginning to dissolve in the light she emitted.
"No," they wailed. "No, we cannot die. We are eternal."
"You are not eternal," Scout seemed to say with another bark. "You are bound, and I unbound you."
The creatures dissolved, their forms breaking apart like smoke in a hurricane. Within seconds, they were gone, and the vault was filled with golden light.
Marcus stood in stunned silence, watching as Scout shrank back to her normal size and trotted over to him, wagging her tail as if nothing had happened.
"Good girl," Marcus whispered, kneeling down to pet her. Good girl." Cornelius's ghostly form flickered into view. He looked different now, less solid, less menacing, more like a tired old man than an ancient demon.
"The guardians are gone," he said. "The vault is open. The gold is yours." The gold was real. Marcus stood in the center of the vault, surrounded by bars of gold that gleamed in the magical light. There were coins, too, hundreds of them, minted with the emblems of the Confederacy. And there were other things. Jewelry, watches, precious gems taken from the bodies of Cornelius's victims over the decades.
"This is worth—" Marcus started, but he couldn't finish the sentence. The number was too large, too incomprehensible. "At current market rates, approximately $12 million, Cornelius said. Perhaps more, depending on the collector market. The coins alone are worth a fortune to the right buyers."
Marcus walked among the treasure, his mind reeling. He thought about what he could do with this money. He could buy a house. He could get medical treatment for his bad leg. He could do anything. But then he thought about what Cornelius had done to get this gold. The murders, the betrayals, the decades of terror.
"You said you wanted to make things right," Marcus said, turning to face the ghost. "What does that look like?"
Cornelius was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with centuries of remorse. "There are descendants," he said. "The men I killed, the men whose gold I stole, some of them had families. I have watched them over the years, out of guilt if nothing else. There are great-great-grandchildren living in Georgia, in Louisiana, in Virginia. They don't know about the gold. They don't know what happened to their ancestors. They just know that their family lost everything when the war ended, and they've been struggling ever since." "You want me to give the gold back to them?" "I want you to use it to help them. Not all of it, not directly, but enough to make a difference, enough to give them the lives they should have had." Marcus nodded slowly. He thought about the veterans he knew, the men and women he had met in shelters and VA waiting rooms. He thought about the way society treated people who had sacrificed everything for their country. "I'll do something else with it too," he said. "I'll set up a foundation for homeless veterans, for people who can't get the help they need, for people like me." Cornelius nodded, and his form flickered with what might have been approval. "And the curse?" Marcus asked. "What happens to you?"
"That somewhere beneath the monster, there was still a man who had made terrible choices."
Marcus nodded slowly.
He thought about his own records, his own memories of the things he had done and seen in Afghanistan. He thought about how easy it would be to bury them, to pretend they didn't exist. "I'm gonna need your help," Marcus said, "to find the descendants, to set up the foundation, to do all of this. Are you willing to help?"
Cornelius looked at him with those ancient, weary eyes. "I have spent over a century trying to escape my past. I think it is time to face it instead."
Then we have a deal. The next 6 months were the busiest of Marcus's life. With Cornelius's guidance, he located the descendants of the men who had been murdered for the Confederate gold. There were 11 families spread across the American South, and they all received anonymous packages containing gold coins worth approximately $500,000 each, along with letters explaining their history. The letters were written by Cornelius, dictated to Marcus, and they contained the full confession of his crimes, names, dates, methods, everything. The families were free to do what they wanted with the information. Some chose to forget it, to accept the gold as compensation and move on. Others pursued legal action, though no charges could be filed against a ghost. A few simply used the money to improve their lives and told no one where it had come from. The Delaney Foundation for Homeless Veterans was established with $3 million in initial funding. Marcus hired a staff of professionals to run it while he focused on outreach, visiting shelters and VA hospitals across the country to tell his story and encourage others to seek help. The Blackwood Hotel was renovated at a cost of $2 million, with Marcus donating the money anonymously. When it reopened as a luxury hotel with a focus on hospitality for veterans, the reviews were overwhelmingly positive. Critics praised its atmosphere of peace and comfort, its commitment to service, its seemingly magical ability to make guests feel at home. Cornelius watched the reopening from the shadows, his form growing weaker as the curse lifted. He had given Marcus everything, the records, the locations, the full history of his crimes. And with each confession, with each piece of gold released into the world, a little more of the darkness left him. "Not long now," Cornelius said one evening, as he and Marcus sat in the hotel's restored courtyard. The black roses had finally bloomed white, their curse lifted along with everything else.
"Are you scared?" Marcus asked.
"No," Cornelius replied. "I am. Relieved and grateful. You gave me something I could not give myself. A chance to make amends."
"It wasn't just me. Scout had a lot to do with it."
Scout, who was sleeping at Marcus's feet, lifted her head and wagged her tail. She had returned to her normal appearance after the battle in the vault, but sometimes, in moments of danger or stress, Marcus could still see the golden glow in her eyes. "She was sent to guide you," Cornelius said. "That much I know for certain. The universe has a way of sending help to those who need it most. You needed her, and she needed you."
"Do you think we saved you? Truly saved you?"
Cornelius's form flickered, and for a moment Marcus could see through him to the stars beyond. "I think I saved myself," Cornelius said, "and you gave me the tools to do it. That's what we do for each other, Sergeant. We give each other the tools to do the things we cannot do alone." Scout barked softly, and Cornelius smiled, or did something that might have been a smile. "Goodbye, Marcus. Thank you for everything." His form dissolved, not into shadow, but into light, into thousands of tiny golden particles that floated up into the night sky. Marcus watched them go, feeling a strange mix of grief and peace. Scout pressed against his leg, and Marcus put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Come on, girl," he said. "Let's go home." 2 years later, the Delaney Foundation had helped over 10,000 veterans find housing, employment, and medical care. Marcus Delaney had become something of a celebrity in veteran circles, though he hated the term. He preferred to think of himself as a bridge, a connection between those who had served and those who could help. He no longer lived in the shelter. He had an apartment now, a small but comfortable place near the park where he liked to walk Scout every morning. The apartment was nothing fancy, but it was his, and that was enough.
The Blackwood Hotel had become his second home. He served on its board of directors, helping to guide its mission of serving veterans and others in need. The hotel's profits supported the foundation, creating a sustainable cycle of giving.
And Scout. Scout was still with him, still loyal, still the best friend he had ever had. She was getting older now, her muzzle starting to gray, but she still had the same spark of intelligence in her eyes. Sometimes, late at night, Marcus would catch her looking at him with an expression that seemed almost human. "What are you, really?" he would ask her, and she would just wag her tail and lay her head on his lap. He never got an answer. But then again, he realized, he didn't need one. Some mysteries were better left unsolved. Some gifts were better accepted without explanation. One evening, as Marcus and Scout walked past the spot where they had first met, the alley between the furniture store and the hotel, Marcus stopped and looked down at his companion. "You know," he said, "I used to think that finding you was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me." Scout tilted her head, listening. "But I was wrong. It wasn't luck. It was right. You found me because I needed to be found, and I needed to find a purpose again." Scout stood up on her hind legs and pressed her paws against Marcus's chest, licking his chin. Marcus laughed, the sound strange to his own ears after so many years of silence. All right, he said. "Let's go home."
They walked into the night together, the homeless veteran and his faithful dog, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and had brought light to a cursed place. Behind them, the Blackwood Hotel glowed with warmth, a beacon of hope for all who needed shelter.
And somewhere, in the spaces between stars, something ancient and powerful smiled, satisfied with the work it had set in motion so long ago.